Cool. Well, welcome to Pharmacist Diaries, by the way, and thanks for making time for me to come onto the podcast today.
Good to join you. Pleasure.
Yeah. So we usually kickstart our episodes by asking you why you became a pharmacist in the first place.
Uh, I would say it was kind of a space of enjoying kind of the sciences as a kid, knowing that I wanted to kind of move in that direction with probably wrapped around it the financial security and the if you like, the aspiration of having a comfortable life. That's probably a summary of it. Coming from kind of a working class background, working class environment, I guess it was kind of pharmacist was a bit of a beacon in communities, and I don't think the sports car harmed kind of that image either. Seeing that pull up in front of a pharmacy as a young boy for somebody who was quite car centric, so it was probably quite a shallow motivation, really, rather than you probably get a lot of people on here saying they want to help people. I think that was certainly part of it as well. It's quite important. um, so
No, fair enough. No. Um, I mean, a lot of people do say that, yeah, they want to help people, but there's a lot of people who say, family pressures. There are some people who say that, they tried to apply for medical school, it didn't quite work out, and they chose pharmacy as a backup.
yeah,
And, it's kind of one of the best decisions that they've made, and it suited their personality and their skills, etc. And they really enjoy what they do. I mean, like you, my parents also kind of tried to advise me in the right direction about choosing the right career, which would allow me to have that financial stability and be independent and not potentially rely on kind of getting married and having a husband who's going to
yeah,
support me. And they thought that that was extremely valuable in terms of what I do for a long-term career. Um, and also the flexibility as a pharmacist. And even then, when they were advising me, 15 odd years ago, they were well aware. My parents both owned a pharmacy for a long time, not that they're pharmacists. They had pharmacists working for them, but they were aware that, you could have, a long-term job. And then if you wanted to have children and take a career break and then do locuming or go into hospital, like the options were there for you. And
yeah,
that flexibility as a woman or a man would be good for me.
yeah.
So yeah, fair play. If financial stability is really important, and you've made it work for you. So happy days.
Yeah, I would say that sort of the idea, I guess, as a youngster that, as you say, you can become financially stable and self-sufficient. Um, Seeing a lot of pals come out of uni potentially with kind of an ambiguous career path in some ways, I guess, was probably maybe unsettling. You look at that and you think, well, look, if I'm going to invest all this time and energy into a course, I'd like a little bit more security and certainty around what I'm then going to move on to. And that was probably quite a big part of it. Um, but actually, I mean, fundamentally, for all I've mentioned at last of all, patience, I guess. Um, the enjoyment in kind of the early days and working Saturday shifts and forming relationships with patients kind of on a human, real level rather than uh, patient to healthcare professional with some kind of wall in the middle. That was something I was really keen on, being quite approachable as an individual, and that, in fairness, is something that I think I've carried all the way through my career, and that's something that I feel really strongly about today.
Oh, that's great. And when you were at university, did you know what aspect of pharmacy that you wanted to pursue, and where I guess you were going to end up as a pharmacist?
Uh, Good question. Never, so always fancied industry, probably more of a commercial route alongside potentially primary care. Never Never took a placement in hospital. Never stepped foot in hospital in terms of an actual um, kind of pre-reg uh, thought. Never, never really kind of wanted to head in that direction. Had a fair number of chats with some folks in the pharma industry and some kind of mentors at that stage. That was very useful, but didn't really know an awful lot, I guess, beyond community and primary care. So I had a Saturday job and a summer holiday job essentially in a community pharmacy. What I probably realised in advance of pre-reg was that I didn't really want to spend 100% of my week in a community pharmacy. There are lots of people that do, and for them, fantastic. It's a real admirable role. As a pharmacist who struggles probably to spend time in the same four walls in such a kind of a closed environment for me, as it felt. I then decided to step out of that. So with pre-reg, it was quite a new thing at the time, probably 12 years ago or so, looking at a split pre-reg, particularly where it was split between community and GP. So I spent some time in community
Mm.
pharmacy through pre-reg, some time in um, a medicines optimization role in primary care, but also had the real kind of luxury of being trained in warfarin monitoring. So ran an anti-coag clinic as soon as I was qualified, and got involved in that prior to qualification, which was great. Um, so I guess for me it was more about understanding that pharmacy was going to be the base and the platform and almost the insurance policy in some ways as a career. And beyond that, once I had that piece of paper in my hand that said you've done that and you've made that, it was about then moving on to the big wide world and what else is out there. And the first step was GP, really.
Interesting. Okay. That is quite unique because that was quite a while ago. So having a split pre-reg
Yeah,
it
yeah.
wasn't that common back
No.
then. So yeah, definitely interesting. Let me ask you, when you talk about, you had some mentors, um, was that something that was organized through the university or something that you decided to pursue on your own?
Pursued on my own, and I think I've had a number of mentors through either official or unofficial, really, through my career. And I think it's important to find those people, whether it's a colleague internally or whether it is somebody entirely external that is in a position or has done something with their career and their life that you look up to, and you think, great, good for them. How have they got there? What has it taken? What have they done? So I had one mentor, again in the unofficial bracket, who I guess I, as a student, looked up to and sought out and spoke to at events that would kind of happen at the university, but then kept in touch with, dropped emails back and forward, got some thoughts on, some feedback in terms of routes around career, and ultimately just took it as a learning opportunity, really. But I think the same is true of careers. There've been lots of mentors through my career that I've been able to point to, um, that have been, parts of my network essentially that I've then learned a lot from. So I think today we're probably big on seeking out official mentors who you need to have a catch up with quarterly or monthly or whatever, and that person is almost turns into a career coach for you. I think what I've tried to do is just build rapport and build relationships. Maybe not even tried to do, just built rapport and relationships with people who I've then found interesting and learned from. And I think as long as you do that, if that's what you want to do, you know what the net impact of that is that you continue to grow. That person adds something to your career and your life that you didn't have prior, so that they allow you to take that step. Um, yeah. So official mentors,
Interesting.
I've
No,
probably
I
had
can.
very few. That's the reality. I've probably I've probably harassed my way to mentorship.
No, but it's valuable to discuss this because I think that students who are at university now may not have the same access potentially to mentors in the same respect that we used to seek them out in our time of being in university and pre-reg year. And I think things have changed slightly with obviously Oriel coming into play with getting yourself a pre-reg year
Mm.
placement. You don't necessarily have to have all this experience in order to get a good, it's not pre-reg actually, it's trainee pharmacist,
Yeah.
the trainee pharmacist roles now. Um, and obviously the pandemic has made differences where you're not necessarily going on summer placements or internships simply because they haven't been allowed for the last
Yeah.
year and a half, and that will slowly pick up again. And students do rely on their personal tutors. I mean, I'm a tutor for students at KCL, and we're expected to see them 3 times a year.
Mm.
But I've got 10 students and I work 1 day a week for the university. So the amount of time that I can really give is quite limited.
Mm.
And there is quite a high expectation for us to support these students, but how much time we can give varies quite significantly
Yeah.
depending on, you know, who you are. So I think it is really valuable to seek out that mentorship. And I probably didn't do it intentionally during my pre-reg year or when I was a student.
Mm.
I was working like you in a community pharmacy every weekend. I had, parents who obviously owned and ran pharmacies. So lots of other pharmacists that they knew that I could kind of speak to if I needed advice on kind of career planning.
Yeah.
But I've been quite independent and kind of made my own decisions from quite a young age from that perspective. So I just kind of got on with it. And it was only until I qualified and started my residency, and being in a hospital, you rotate to a different specialty every 3 months, and then trying to really understand, well, okay, I'm getting experience and learning, I'm doing my diploma, but what is the next step? And I found that next step really challenging because I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do, mainly because I loved so much. And that is also, it's a great thing, but it's also a problem because now there are so many options
Yeah.
for junior and newly qualified pharmacists that it's difficult to know where to go. So I think the mentorship from that perspective is really valuable,
Yeah.
and something that we should be encouraging.
Yeah. I mean, a couple
Yeah.
of things in
So
that.
you
Really.
obviously go on.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say
Yeah,
that
go
I
on.
think a couple of things within that kind of undoubtedly, the pandemic has impacted the face-to-face elements of these things. So right the way through university now, of course. Whereas previously, when I was graduating, we would have held industry evenings. So I studied at Sunderland University, some really great industry links up here in the northeast, some really great links overall. I think as a local kind of academic system that then fits into the practical real world. We've got some great people who want to be involved in that, and I had a fantastic education in Sunderland, loved it there. Um, so the face-to-face element, albeit that's kind of a challenge right now. I guess the advantage that people coming through now have is technology. LinkedIn wasn't really around, wasn't really a thing. So whilst access to mentorship and access to advice, meaningful advice, might be harder to come by, I guess, if you care, you'll probably make it happen anyway. If you've got an ambition to go out and learn, and you really kind of have that fire in you that says, I want to grow, I want to pick up the phone, and I'm going to get in touch with somebody. There's rarely a time when either myself or colleagues that are in a similar position, if we get a request from somebody to kind of give a bit of advice, pick a phone up, have a chat, I think one of the nice things that we can do in life is help people that are kind of earlier along in the journey than we are. So I would just encourage people to use those digital means really to get out there, and if you want to have a conversation with somebody who's a prolific whatever in their field, and looks like they've had an interesting time and journey, just reach out to them. That would be my advice. And you know, they might not have the time to help you, but you know, if you don't ask, you've got no chance really.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. And you're right. You're right. When you think about the virtual world these days, anything's possible, and you can get in touch with people so much easier than you used to be able to. I mean, LinkedIn is just an amazing,
Yeah,
you know, website that's been created for professional networking, and you wouldn't meet all these people in the past. When we were doing our pre-reg year, it was just,
yeah,
oh, I'll introduce you to so and so, or you have to attend face-to-face conferences to get, your name out there and get known, and
yeah,
find that mentor outside of your workplace. So I mean, even Instagram, there are so many pharmacists out there now doing some really amazing things. Even the podcast is a great way for people to really know what other pharmacists are doing,
yeah,
and gives an opportunity for junior pharmacists, students, to then go and reach out and say, "Hey, look, I've seen this episode on Anisha's podcast, and I'm really intrigued by your career. Is there a way that we can have a short discussion, or can we keep in touch so that I can get some mentorship?" And
yeah,
like you said, all of us are willing to be supportive to people who want to grow and learn and improve in their professional career, and we'll make the time for it.
yeah. And just one thing to add to that, I guess, one of probably the earliest and most critical decisions I made, I think, just in terms of wanting to uh, get out there and do more and learn more, was asking my first employer post qualification, who I'd gone through training year with, was an organisation that were quite innovative. They worked across primary care, but they actually owned some GP surgeries as well, ran the contracts, and the place was led by a pharmacist, and managing director was a pharmacist. And I guess being in that entrepreneurial environment and seeing how they developed as an organisation, I really wanted to kind of get stuck into some of the aspects of that from a can I learn, but can I contribute in some way to this? Certainly mixed success at that stage of my career, because probably desperate to do more, but not 100% sure exactly what that should look like. And I guess for a lot of organizations, handed an individual who's saying, I want to do more and I want to kind of learn, without a real clear pathway in place for a pharmacist. I think that they supported me in a really nice way, allowed me a little bit of project time, gave me some discrete things to work on, were very accommodating, very supportive, and also supported me from an education perspective as well. So I undertook a Chartered Management Institute qualification the year after qualifying, or the year of qualifying, I think. As soon as I got through pre-reg, I think I started that in the December, and then moved into an MBA. So part of me, in fairness, was looking at that MBA and thinking, well, MBA is a thing that people do later in life when they've been there and done it, and they kind of want to cement their position. That was my interpretation of an MBA and what it should be. But I kind of thought, well, I'm at the start of this journey. I know that I've got an interest in business, the commercial aspects of the company I'm working with. And actually, if I can give myself the tools at 22 by attaining that MBA, then that's kind of only going to set me up for good things, really. That was my headspace. So, but I think as part of that, wrapped around all of that, that mentorship came with it as part of a package. So managing director, business directors, I got a lot of exposure to, I got a lot of time with, and learned a lot from. So I think part of it is just about asking the question and trying to put yourself out there, really. If they don't know that you've got that ambition to do that and you're not forthcoming with that request, it might not always be a yes. And of course, the day to day needs to be done. But, it could be just little bits around the edges that help you develop, I guess.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I totally credit you for doing an MBA so early on in your, pharmacy career. That's amazing. And you're right, I have quite a similar mindset, that you would expect someone to do an MBA when they've, had several years of experience and they're kind of grounded in their career, and then they step it up, you
And
know.
that might be the
But
right
you're
way.
right, you can do it
That
at
might
any
be the
time.
right way to do it. To be honest, I'm not an expert, but it certainly helped me at that point in time. It was a nice thing to do, and very different to pharmacy. Pharmacy is so it's so black and white. It's so right and wrong. There's a right way of dispensing a drug and a wrong way. The MBA was a kind of 2 years full of absolute grey, total grey. Here's a theory. What are your thoughts? Here's a leadership module. This is somebody's opinion. Pharmacy is kind of stark contrast to that. So I loved that sort of diversity in terms of the content and the style of that as well. So I think certainly MBAs for pharmacists who've got some level of commercial agenda or want to kind of think they might want to move in that direction, I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. I completely agree. And it's great that you did it really early. And I do say to a lot of students, even now, that, start writing down, reflective diaries or somewhere, whether it's on your phone or wherever, like, what are you good at? What kind of skills have you got through university? And, what do you enjoy? What are you passionate about? Like, what inspires you? And keep a diary of that, because that will help to guide you in terms of your early career. And when there is so much variety in pharmacy and in terms of the options, in terms of jobs, this will help you to decide where you can go, and also identify what skills you don't have, or things that you're not confident in or you don't feel comfortable with, and push yourself in those directions to build them up.
Yeah.
And, that type of reflective practice on a week-to-week basis does make a massive difference, and helps you to navigate your own journey. So, yeah, no, it's really interesting to get your perspective on that. So completing the MBA, where were you working at that time, or did you do it full-time?
So did it part time. Did it around work really. The luxuries of being sort of 20 and being able to do those things, and then kids arrive, right? So did it part time over 2 years, and kind of attended evening classes. I guess a lot parts of it were web based, but felt like it actually worked quite well. I wasn't at that point ready to step away from work to do something like that, but being able to apply it to my work environment was definitely a benefit.
And did that open doors or open up opportunities to go into a new role?
Um, so I probably didn't see it as um, so the next step, I guess, which might have been a bit of a strange one, given the well, maybe not, given the commercial kind of interests. I'd spent a period of time with this company that were essentially a provider in primary care across community pharmacy, clinical services, including medicines optimization, some anticoag stuff. And after a period of time, probably 4 years with them, I think. So it was a fair length of time for me, respectively, in one role, albeit with that development. Um, I stepped into a CCG, so local CCG meds optimization role, was advertised. Spoke to head of, and felt like having some experience on the other side of the coin would again be interesting. Kind of, I guess, subconsciously knew that it would help me grow and give me a more complete picture of the healthcare service, really. So having had that provider side of things, I wanted to do that, and enjoyed that really. So stepped in as I guess the brief of run a work plan, look at cost and quality agenda. Um, Fairly standard meds op pharmacist role, not patient facing, which was a big change, I guess. But I felt like I was kind of enacting benefit for patients and change by leading the team to deliver that work plan and setting the agenda and working with obviously the rest of the team to do that. So I felt like kind of at that system strategic level, by stepping into a CCG, I was able to apply some of the MBA aspects of what I'd picked up actually, because it wasn't patient A here and now. It was, we've got thousands of patients that are dot dot dot. So being able to support new models of care, new pathways, prescribing changes, whatever that might be, just little things like, we ran we took some we took a collection of all of the pharma companies that were involved in our respiratory formulary. So we've got a formulary. We know which products are on there. We know that there would be some changes there. We got all of the companies together within that formulary, and we ran some education for healthcare professionals right across the CCG. So all of it was aimed at MDIs and DPIs getting our healthcare professionals to understand better how a patient should use them. In some ways, really quite frightening that not many people kind of counsel patients in the right way with an inhaler still. So we found that lots of pharmacists, lots of nurses, GPs even, just weren't that aware. And these were people who were maybe running respiratory clinics as well. So it wasn't just, I'm going to dip a toe in a bit of respiratory work. There was definitely an upskill need there. And I think part of it was maybe that the inhaler market just kind of exploded at that point in time. There were maybe a handful of devices right up to then. All of a sudden, it's maybe tripled or quadrupled. So I think there was a need there. But that was just one example of kind of, I guess, that strategic piece that said you can deliver benefit for patients en masse if you want to. But certainly for me at that point in time, a commissioning environment was the way to do it. So I spent a few years with the CCG, and then I guess probably felt like I'd learned all I could, and had a great time, and could have probably continued in that environment if I'd wanted to, but then had the little sort of flicker again of it's time to learn. It's time to move on and learn some more stuff.
Yeah, sometimes you get comfortable and then you're like, oh, I need a bit of a boost or a change or a challenge, and
Yeah, and
where can I kind of improve?
yeah, and I've got, there's no right or wrong way, and I would never judge anyone for having been with an organization for a very long period of time, even if it's that same role. People find something that they love. And when you went back to what you said about looking at kind of career pathways, for me, didn't do an awful lot of reflection, but probably did it subconsciously, if at all. Didn't
Yeah.
didn't look at skills and strengths and weaknesses. So it was probably quite a poor reflector in reality back then. Literally just followed interests. So what interests me, what excites me, what do I enjoy here? And it was always very clear. It was kind of like a crowd of people, and there'd be one person in the crowd, and you're like, well, yeah, that's where I'm going. It's really clear. So there was never kind of a level of indecision or a feeling of I've got so much choice here, I'm overwhelmed by the choice. It was like there's a very clear pathway here. I want to do that next. I want to go there. I want to find this. Even if it just feels right at the time. I guess the role I had after the CCG was an example of that. So been with the CCG a few years by that point. Enjoyed it. Liked working with the team. Getting closer to general practice in that environment was great. Working with some GPs with special interests on guideline reform and stuff like that, really enjoyed. But then sort of just felt like that commercial thing was kind of what I was looking for. So had the MBA, wanted to get maybe a little bit more involved in the business aspects of pharmacy and doing the doing on a provider level. So saw a role with Lloyd's Pharmacy's parent company. And actually, at that point in time, didn't really know what the role was when I was looking at it, I guess, and that was much to the naivety and maybe the age I was at the time, and actually just a general lack of market experience in that private environment. But this role came up for a healthcare development manager, and I was kind of looking at it, thinking, well, it seems interesting. The job description read well in terms of what I was interested in. And in reality, it was probably the best career step that I'd made, with having the foundation of all the things that had gone before it. Don't believe I would have got that role without the commissioner aspect as well. I think as a provider, they looked at me with that commissioning experience and thought, yeah, that's quite useful to us. Um, Maybe I'm wrong, but that was a good step for me, and spent a lot of time there with that organisation, developing with that role, and then into subsequent roles.
And I assume that role isn't just for pharmacists; it's open to other professions
Yeah,
or other.
yeah,
Yeah,
um,
that's interesting.
yeah. It's not, well. I guess it's not. It's not just so that there's no pharmacist requirement, no pharmacist limitation.
Yeah.
Um, what the role looked like essentially, as a healthcare development manager, you were responsible for the. So you're a regional manager. You had a region. So I worked across northeast and Yorkshire, but got involved in some national programs as and when. But it was basically ensuring that um, all of the services that we deliver clinical value for um, our partners. Now, some of those partners were NHS, so working in, we delivered OPD services, and still do. So, you'd be maybe sitting down with the trust, having a contract meeting about their OPD, but you wouldn't just be looking at the clinical and the operational and supporting any aspects of that, but you'd kind of have a view of, the commercial, how are we performing, in terms of, it's a business. So how is it, how are we bringing in new business? How are we growing our services? How are we ensuring that the activity that we're contributing toward as a team means that there are more of them out there? So it gave me a massive amount of sales experience, I guess, but probably sales was a dirty word when I went into the job. And I felt, I remember having a conversation with a much more experienced pharmacist who was in my team at that time and saying, I've come from the NHS in a commissioning environment, and it felt like I was kind of, selling out. It felt a bit strange. And I remember having that chat with him, and he kind of, I think he probably, very considerate and very supportive, but probably on the inside, probably sort of having a bit of a laugh as well at this level of, this youngster coming in and feeling like he's being tainted. So certainly a level of naivety, I think, in that, thinking that sales slash the commercial world was kind of the devil, when in reality what it taught me is you can actually add value to the NHS, and in some ways you can do more from outside the NHS than you can within the system, in terms of creating value and also patient benefit. And that's still something that I'm passionate about today, in terms of that, working with the NHS and partnering with to support that value creation. But we had a team that was maybe 7 strong nationally, and I think we had one non-pharmacist in that team. So it was certainly very pharmacist heavy, but the whole organization was, because fundamentally I think people had moved in from a pharmacist background with some level of subject knowledge, expertise. So great role, because I was exposed to things that I hadn't seen any level of in a commissioning environment or prior to that in a small organization. So the way big companies do things that allow you to then kind of look at business in a different way, things like governance arrangements, things like financial modeling, tender submission, um, consultation around services and tenders, growing relationships, and actually doing that in an authentic way, and actually selling services, I guess, in an authentic way as well. And I think the thing that stopped selling being a dirty word for me, and maybe the devil, as I thought the private sector was when I joined, which begs the question why I joined, I guess, if I felt that way. was the fact that selling services when you believe in them, that they're actually, um, they're really doing some good, means that it's authentic. And I guess if it's authentic, it's something that sits well with you, that you actually, as a healthcare professional, of course, you wouldn't, I assume nobody registered on the GPHC really should be or would be um, getting themselves into a place where they're selling something or doing something they don't believe in. And that might be a strong statement to make. And it's probably a little bit black and white. But actually, I just think from a professional responsibility point of view, you probably shouldn't be pushing things in a big way unless you believe in them. And that was important for me. And had that not been the case, I probably would have left that role much sooner. But yeah, had a long time with the company in that sort of head office in inverted commas world, and it was a great period of personal growth for me. Great kind of skill builder, and yeah, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with stepping out of your comfort zone and trying something new. Like,
Yeah,
I finished my residency and met my husband, and he was already living in Dubai, so I had to make that choice to leave the NHS and be with him. And of course, like when you're in your early 20s and you're not married and you don't have kids, life decisions are relatively simple in comparison to now. So, I took that leap of courage, and I went out to a new country and had to find a job when I got there. And I fell into a role in emergency services. And when you talk about tenders and things like that, that business aspect,
yeah,
they were obviously looking for contracts all the time for paramedics and emergency services. And one of those was that we got awarded the Formula One contract. Um, and pharmacy services are always involved with supplying medications to the medical center, setting up what the medical center is going to look like, making sure that all the ambulances are filled with medications, the staff are trained on what they're actually going to be using, creating that formulary, importing drugs into the country. So, loads and loads of skills that I didn't necessarily have training for. Um, Obviously, as a pharmacist, and when you're an undergrad, you don't learn about all of these things. But I really loved trying something new, and I learned so much about myself, and I learned about the fact that I love service improvement, and I like to make change, and I like to see whatever services I work in grow. And so I really, yeah, I really impressed by the fact that you went out there and did your MBA so early. You've obviously looked at lots of different opportunities and thought outside the box in terms of leaving that kind of pharmacist role on the day to day, kind of looking at dealing with patients face to face, and taking that leap of courage, which can be quite hard. I missed the NHS when I was in Dubai and Abu Dhabi massively. But I realized that I need a job where I'm with patients as well as doing something else. And I
yeah,
kind of need that variety. And I missed patient care so much. And then I realized how much I needed it.
yeah,
So at the moment, I'm really happy being back in the NHS. Um, but I also still like to think a little bit bigger.
yeah,
And how can I support, like, I'm in palliative care at the moment, and there's not many pediatric palliative care pharmacists, and I'm trying to kind of develop that national and international network of people that are also in the same position as me, and looking at, well, what can we do nationally or internationally to support these patients and grow our services and improve what we do, which is where my role from working in emergency services and working in Formula One has kind of guided me
yeah,
and given me that experience to actually say we should be doing this, and we shouldn't just be looking at what we're doing for our own patients,
yeah.
but making it like expanding that network out. Um, so that's quite amazing. How did this role then lead to kind of setting up um, MORPh Consultancy then?
So, well, probably first of all, worth saying for the benefit of my co-directors that I didn't set it up. I'm sure if I took that credit, they'd have some issue with that. Um, what? So where did we find ourselves? So I'd moved into a national role with then Lloyd's parent, McKesson, uh,
Yeah.
was working in a business unit that was essentially more what I was kind of had a passion for, I guess, which was primary care pharmacy. So supporting teams to work in GP. So COVID strikes, and I guess all bets are off. COVID landed, community branches are struggling. Uh, Sickness, of course, isolation is an issue. Um, so more or less, and credit to the head office functions at that time, more or less all of the pharmacists that we were kind of not patient facing put our hands up and sort of said, yeah, we're happy to step in and come and work in branch. So having not set foot in a branch for maybe 5 years at that point in time, kind of just just did that. I'd maybe done one or two kind of little locum covers as favors or other in that time. Um, so it certainly wasn't a familiar one to me. That that kind of whole thing, I guess, of working closer to home, not traveling kind of length and breadth of the country as I was in the role. Uh, it coincided with my little boy being at an age where, so he was approaching one, and just being closer to home through the spring and summer months and having longer at home and being home kind of evenings, weekends, um, without interruption. I guess that, but enjoying the patient facing aspect of it just gave me a um, new direction, really, a little bit of a jolt. I think COVID did that for a lot of people. I've spoken to a lot of people where they've said essentially lockdown and COVID's reframed their lives for them so that the things that they thought were important when they were head down and working in a certain way actually weren't important to them at all beyond that. And it was certainly a massive kick for me to get me out of. I say get me out of. It was a situation that I probably didn't realize was a problem for me until I then saw it as a problem. Working away from home to a point, and that kind of thing. So the work-life balance through COVID was sort of forced in one direction, and as a result of that, I guess I started seeing things with fresh eyes, really. So the direction of the business and the way that things were allowed me the opportunity to essentially leave the organization and move into what I've got now, which is a portfolio week. So I spend my week between um, um, strategic and kind of clinical operations, but maybe a bit of commercial thrown in there as well, roles between two pharmacy related organizations and pharmacist centric organizations. So one of them is the Pharmacist Network. The Pharmacist Network, I joined the company upon leaving, um, and the Pharmacist Network partners with the NHS and GPs first and foremost to support the delivery of pharmacist services, either pharmacy technician or pharmacist. So we put GP pharmacists into their roles, either remotely or in person. We support them, we train them, we develop them over time, and we guide them along the way. So we bring people in who've got lots of experience. We've got people who are kind of senior pharmacists with a wealth of GP experience, um, right through to people that are totally fresh into GP world that they've literally never set foot in a general practice before. So we bring them in and we help them to grow into that role and do that in a safe way. Um, and I think fundamentally that's important to me because I've loved working in GP, and I feel really passionate about the contribution that a pharmacist can make as part of that GP team. Um, so much so that I work in a PCN now, part time through the week, and having that patient facing clinical role for me, not only does it help to inform both MORPh and the Pharmacist Network, but it also just gets me back to where I felt I was at the start of my career, where forming personal relationships with patients, um, even if it's on a 20-minute call, um, building rapport with the patient and helping them to understand more about their medication and treatment decisions so that they can take more ownership. They're all things that are probably buzzwords that people hear all the time around patient ownership and empowering patients. A lot of people probably write it off, or, well, I'm maybe being cynical. A lot of people can write that stuff off as just being buzzwords and nothing else. But sitting down with a patient and just having some simple chat with them about, and the simpler the better often, about why they're taking that medication and how they're finding it. And, is there anything else that's worrying you? Just real simple, open questions like that through consultation. I really love that. And there's nothing better than finishing a consultation with a patient and them saying, do you know what, I've really found this helpful. I had one lady yesterday, so I'm in clinic yesterday, and she's asking me, how long have you been here? Like, is this a thing that's new? Have we always been able to speak to a pharmacist? And just having those sort of moments of, do you know what, we're really doing some good here as pharmacists. And I get that directly from my own encounters with patients, but I get that through our teams as well. So, yeah, we've got lots of pharmacists on that side and pharmacy techs as well who are working in GP and having a great time, and the GPs love them, and that is music to our ears, really. So that's kind of one side that I moved into to join the leadership of that organisation and help it to become more than it was then. And I'm happy to say that we're doing well, it's successful, and we've got lots of solid relationships across the NHS, which is great. So the other side, which is MORPh. MORPh are an organisation that I have, I guess, first and foremost engaged with as a professional looking for training. So MORPh have a training network that is almost 6,000 strong. So it's probably outside of kind of the, dare I say, compulsory education pathways. It's probably the largest network of professionals coming together within pharmacy to actually, within the UK, I would suggest, coming together to develop and learn and grow their competency. So I was aware of MORPh in that capacity and knew that they did some great stuff. What we started to then do is, I guess, we created a bit of a business within a business, and we started to diversify a little bit to join some bits up. And for me, that led back to some of the things that I had experience in, delivering clinical services, namely. So I've been at this portfolio career, I guess, and portfolio week for a year now. And I can honestly say I wouldn't look back. Really love it. Really love the blend of patient-facing versus non. Love the challenge and the variation in the week with the different organisations that I engage with. And I think that's another one of the benefits of having this like sort of choice dilemma. We're no longer in a space where young pharmacists come through and have to say, right, it's 100% community, it's 100% hospital. You can go out there and have that real nice blend of everything that the pharmacy world has to offer. So I think that's probably one of the main career lessons I've learned, really. And the second thing linked to that is, I guess, would I be where I am now without every chunk of experience along the way? If I didn't have that provider experience and the mentorship and the MBA in the early days, the commissioning experience building on that, moving into that very corporate private world, albeit still pharmacy related or pharmacy centric, would I then have learned the lessons to effectively run my own business and engage in this way with kind of the week that I've got? Absolutely not. Now, for anyone that wants to do that, the answer is you kind of, you grow your competency in the way that you do clinically in exactly the same way that you do operationally or commercially. It's about putting yourself into an environment that's outside of your comfort zone, like you said earlier, right? And you grow and you learn and you find a little bit more and you add little bits on and you make a few mistakes, of course, in all aspects of this. Hopefully less so in the clinical than the others. But where that then kind of gets you to is a place where you've got a much broader set of skills and a much more you are much more able to then take on these things. Is my experience. Yeah, and I don't know whether you agree, and this might you might want to edit this piece out actually, but the feeling around kind of the younger generation, and it might not just be younger generation. I say this as kind of a 30-year-old. I sound like a real old man, um, but I speak to a lot of people who kind of want the shortcut. They want the kind of the instant they want the instant commercial acumen, and they want the instant operational excellence, and they want to be all singing, all dancing. And I guess the message would be, you need to earn that. You can't just get that from willing it to happen. You need to put yourself out there into those situations. There are no shortcuts for experience, really, other than trying to expose yourself to as much of that world as you can. So I think that's probably not a criticism, just a life lesson and a bit of a signpost. Um, anything's there if you want it hard enough, really, and if you if you approach something in the right way.
I'm so glad that I reached out to you because everything that you've just said in the last few minutes has just resonated with me so well. You've kind of taken a massive 360. You've developed a whole bunch of skills. You've really, really pushed in terms of leadership. You knew that you liked, obviously, patient care, and you've taken that 360. And not only are you leading in terms of different organizations for primary care, but you are patient facing at the same time. And that variety in a role and actually doing that on a day-to-day basis is so enjoyable.
Yeah, yeah,
And I feel so similarly about my job because I'm patient facing every day. I'm supporting the pharmacy team in terms of pediatrics, but I'm driving palliative care services forward. And with the students, I've even identified, and you do learn about yourself on a day to day basis. Like I have been a pharmacist for 11 years, but I still feel like I'm getting to know who I am and what I want to become. And I say this really regularly on the podcast because actually your personal circumstances also impact your career massively as well. And becoming a wife and becoming a parent has, changed my perspective on what I want to achieve and how I want to achieve it as well. And
yeah,
it's really helped me to also understand I need to slow down a little bit and not constantly feel pressured to drive my career forward. It will always move forward if I want it to, but at the pace that actually works for me.
yeah,
And even this last month, like so a few months ago I was asked to support with MPharm year one as a professional lead for the whole year group. And I taught the year one students a year ago and I loved it. I loved their kind of like naivety, and they're fresh, and you know that as a pharmacist who's quite passionate about education and training, that you can mold them and kind of get them to think in a very positive way from the start of their career
yeah,
into pharmacy. And the active teaching was something I was massively passionate about. And then when I was asked to take on this role, I was like, yeah, definitely. I love it. Yeah, definitely. But now I'm in it. It's very operational and admin heavy. And I'm like, oh my God, I miss being with the students so badly. I miss teaching them every day. And I want to go back to that. So again, I've learned something new, that I'm good at organizing, I'm good at leadership, I'm good at making things happen.
yeah,
But in terms of students, I want to be with them. I want to teach them. I want to be face to face. So it's something I have to think about long term and in terms of where my career is going to go next. So I really, really appreciate you sharing your story. And I'm really glad that I reached out to you, and I appreciate your time today. And I'm so happy to hear all of these exciting things that you've done and what you've achieved. And also, congratulations on your second baby.
thank you. Yeah.
That has to be out there as
I'm
well.
I'm
Yeah.
usually far less
Um,
tired looking, I'd like to say. So I'm just hoping the bag's under the old eyes. The lighting's probably not great for that either. But no, it's the thing you talk about balance there. It's a really important thing. But, ultimately, can be easier for guys, I think, at times, because, well, It's far less common to take 9 months pat leave than it is mat leave, I guess. Um, so I've actually got a wife who's a
Yeah.
pharmacist and works in GP. Not with me. I might.
Amazing.
Yeah, she couldn't cope with working with me, and I completely understand that. But she, just in the same way, really, that patient facing aspect. I think that's one thing that a lot of us, well, that find ourselves in GP or hospital and community, of course. That it's about those personal relationships, and it's about how you're influencing and how you're affecting your community to kind of get the right outputs for them. But no, it's been
Yeah.
great to join you today, and hopefully a useful one for anyone that's listening.
Yeah, and I'll definitely make sure to put up all the links onto the show notes about the Pharmacist Network and MORPh as well.
Yeah,
Really interesting organizations that I didn't know existed, to be honest, and
yeah,
really definitely something that people should look at. So I'm happy to share all of that going forward.
yeah, absolutely.